Kleenex box wound up across the room, so excuse me. I've got a little drip. So we're starting a new sermon series called Songs of the Summer, and it's from the book of Psalms. And so I want to just tell you a little bit about the book of Psalms, and then we'll look at our psalm of joy for today. The Psalms, if you open your Bible and look at them, they're written like poetry. So it's not a narrative like most of the Bible. And that is because the Psalms are actually lyrics that were sung in worship. So we should think of the book of Psalms, it's like a hymn book. And I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but in our hymn books, the whole first section is Psalms. Like when you turn, I think it's got Advent and Christmas first, and then it's like, oh wait, no, it goes through Easter. Yeah, so I guess it's in the middle, not at the beginning. It's got all these psalms put to music. We don't sing a lot of them. They're not familiar tunes, but it's part of our history that the psalms were written and used to be sung in worship. Now, they weren't all written at one time. It is a historical book. Moses wrote a couple of them, all the way through David, King David and Solomon, the span of a couple thousand years. And the folks who put this collection together chose a really beautiful representation of the works that were available. There's 150 psalms in our Bible, but there were hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of psalms to choose from. I mean, think about hymns and praise songs, right? It's like writing music. There's a whole body of work out there, but they couldn't include everything in the Bible, so those who collected the Bible and created this book chose a collection that really served their purposes to represent all of life. When we look at what's contained in these 150 Psalms, we find a beautiful expression of what it means to be a human and a child of God. In fact, Athanasius, he was a renowned Coptic priest from the 4th century. This is what he said about the book of Psalms. He writes, "It is my view that in the words of this book, the Psalms, the whole human life, in the words of this book is the whole human life, its basic spiritual content, as well as its movements and thoughts, is comprehended and contained. Nothing to be found in human life is omitted." And as you read through the book, you realize it. There are psalms that cover the whole gamut of human existence, from joy and praise and thanksgiving to despair and depression and hopelessness. There are wisdom psalms. There are psalms written for special occasions like coronations, or the return from battle, or the harvest, or the dedication of offerings. And it just encompasses all of who we are. It's a beautiful book to use in your own personal practice. Because of this, whatever you may be feeling on a given day, there is probably a psalm that expresses exactly what you're feeling. And all the psalms point us to God, whether it's crying to God for help or praising God for the great things that God has done. It's all there. So we are going to be looking at a variety of these expressions in the Psalms during the summer and Psalms of the Summer. Our psalm for today is a psalm of joy. It's number 126. And I want you to know the setting of the psalm so that you can really feel the words. It's only 6 verses, but it's a very full and emotional psalm. It was written after the people of Israel were freed from captivity in Persia. So if you remember your timeline of the Old Testament, you may remember that probably 500 or 600 years before Christ, the whole nation of Israel and Judah were conquered Like they were no longer under their own rule of the Jewish people. They were conquered from the north, and then they were conquered from the east. I'm directionally challenged. So Iraq and Iran would be Persia. Babylon would be the other name. They came in and conquered. And you may know that not just conquered, but ruined. Like the walls of the city of Jerusalem were beat down. The temple was destroyed, like rubble. All the precious artifacts of their center of worship were pillaged. And anybody in Israel, if you had an education or a skill or a trade, if you were of some value as a person, you were captured and taken into Persia and used to build their economy. So this period lasted 50 years, and it was called the exile. And after 50 years, there was a new king in Persia who decided to release the people of Israel and let them go home and rebuild. Many decided to stay because they had created livelihoods and had families back in Persia. But a whole host of people decided to return and to rebuild. And so this is a psalm about being freed and about the nation of Israel being restored. So when you hear the word Zion, that's the nation of Israel. So the psalm is up in front of you, and I'd like to read it. When the Lord restored the fortunes of Zion, we were like those who dream. Then our mouth was filled with laughter and our tongue with shouts of joy. Then it was said among the nations, the Lord has done great things for us. The Lord has done great things for us, and we rejoiced. Restore our fortunes, O Lord, like the watercourses in the Negev. May those who sow in tears reap with shouts of joy. Those who go out weeping, bearing the seeds for sowing, shall come home with shouts of joy, carrying their sheaves. It is such a beautiful psalm. So verse 1, we know immediately what's going on. When the Lord restored the fortunes of Zion, meaning released from captivity and the ability to go home and rebuild. This next line, we were like those who dream. So imagine when something wonderful happens and you say to yourself, am I dreaming? Or is this real? That's what this line captures. Are we dreaming that God has really done this for us? Or is this real? And then the realization this is real. And our mouths are filled with laughter and our tongues with shouts of joy. Like this is really happening, this awesome thing. That all the other nations are looking at Israel and saying, well, the Lord has done great things for them. And Israel's like, you know it. The Lord has done great things for us. And we're rejoicing about it. And then we see this juxtaposition. And this is, I'm even going to call it a literary device because it's used a number of times, both in the Bible and in ancient writings. The idea of sowing and reaping, the sowing done through tears or pain, and the reaping done with joy. It's like a thing. So this psalm reflects this well-known language, and it says, may those who sow in tears, referring to the exile, reap with shouts of joy. Those who go out weeping, bearing the seeds for sowing, shall come home with shouts of joy. So these images about the sowing and reaping, it's about joy remembered and joy anticipated, even when times are tough. So it's about the people carrying the seeds of joy with them, even during the exile, so that they can sow those seeds. And like our children learned yesterday, patiently wait for those seeds to grow so that they can reap this harvest of joy. So I have a beautiful commentary on the Psalms, and it said, what the pilgrims, those returning, what the pilgrims remember about the past, they pray for in the present. The restoration of Zion also leads to the complete restoration of the people. So it's both about rebuilding the city and rebuilding the temple, but it's also about the rebuilding of the spiritual life of the people. They were torn down in exile. It was a rough go. But as the city is rebuilt, so are the people restored and rebuilt. And then in the years to come, the memory of this restoration gives the nation hope for their own renewal. And I think about what we have been through and what the world is going through. It's a challenging time to be a human, isn't it? I mean, I don't even need to give you the list because you know it and we're all living with it. I mean, pandemic, right? It has been a rough go. Politically, we have never seen our nation so divided. And those of us who remember, decades past where we actually saw politicians literally reaching across the aisle and shaking hands and working together, those days seem to be gone, and it's rough. We think like, what has this come to that we cannot work together towards common goals? We look at the rise of Putin and Russia now deciding, manifest destiny, like the world is theirs, and now they're marching on Europe, and it's frightening. It takes its toll on us. Even though some of these things aren't happening to us directly, right? It's our world. And I believe our spirits and our souls are affected by what is happening around us. And so this psalm is for us today. We carry the seeds of joy. Those are ours. They come from God. And we need to sow them in trust that God can still bring a harvest of joy. But the thing that's a part of this is that we need to choose that joy. Look for it, embrace it, internalize it. I saw this quote recently, and it said, "Don't wait for things to get easier or simpler or better. Life will always be complicated. Learn to be happy right now so that you don't run out of time." Joy is a choice. The seeds of joy be planted and watered and nurtured in our lives. You know that my family took a vacation last month, and I shared a little bit about it. Pierre's sister, Michelle, they do this timeshare thing, and it was kind of last minute. She's like, "Do you guys want a vacation? Like, we found this timeshare in the Canary Islands." And I'm like, I don't even know where the Canary Islands are. I had to look it up on a map. I'm like, oh, Spain. It's right across from Africa. It's like this desert, deserty island across from the Sahara Desert off the coast of Spain. And we're like, sure. So Pierre and I went. Our kids didn't. Jackson's passport, it's just a long wait. His passport literally arrived the day we got home. So he didn't get to go, and Pace just opted not to go. But we went with Pierre's sister and her husband, and my niece and nephew, who are like 19 and 22, and then Rose, Pierre's mom. And Rose in particular has had a really, really hard pandemic season. For her it was literally like a time of exile with health issues and isolation. And I'm not gonna lie, the travel was hard. It was really hard to travel internationally with her. And we fly standby, right? So there's this whole other layer of stress to travel. But we all made it. All 7 of us made it. And we arrived in Tenerife, which is one of the islands, and the town was Costa Adige. We knew nothing about the Canary Islands. And what we discovered is that it's where all the Brits go to vacation. It was loaded with people from Scotland and England. I mean, like when you went out to eat, it was only people from Britain in the restaurants. We were the only people from the United States there. Like, oh, you came a long way, didn't you? We're like, yes, we did. So our first night there, our first night before we went to the timeshare thing, we stayed at a little place down in the town. It was fully resort town. And it was, hotel rooms and apartments built around this courtyard. And it was a sizable courtyard. And the bottom floor was restaurants and little shops. And there was one restaurant in particular that was just hopping. And we're like, well, let's go there. The sign said homemade sangria. And we're like, yeah. And then we realized every restaurant has that sign in the Canary Islands. So it's called Hair of the Dog, and it was small, like maybe 20 tables. And so it's kind of a storefront with just a few tables in the kitchen, and then all the other tables spill out into this courtyard. And then what we learned is that, and we learned this because everywhere you went, this was happening, the restaurants would hire entertainers to come do live music. And they didn't work for tips, because if you tip them, then they're not tipping the restaurant. So the restaurants actually pay the entertainers to come and play for an hour or two. So we're kind of getting our dinner and having our sangria with all the Brits. And, this guy walks out with his, speakers and microphone and starts playing, American dance tunes. And we were tired. We'd been traveling literally all day. And we're sitting around this table, and it's hot, and this guy starts playing music, and you see kind of the room, especially the wives. The husbands, not so much. The wives are want to dance, right? This is what happens. My beautiful 19-year-old nephew. So you keep it, my husband's black, right? I'm married into a black family, so we stood out like a sore thumb. Like, we're the only black people in the Canary Islands, practically. So here we are with me, and my beautiful nephew with the gorgeous, woven dreads, he stands up, and he goes over to this gray-haired British lady and asks her to dance. And they get up, just spontaneously. Devin just did this. They get up and start dancing, and then Buela, who's got like a bad back and a knee that needs replacing, our grandma, she gets up with my niece, and they start dancing, and I'm like, okay, this is my wheelhouse. I don't know how to do this. So the rest of the family, we get up and start dancing, and as I started to look around this little crowd in this restaurant, I'm like, there were people in that crowd that wanted to dance, and they weren't dancing. And so I just, a couple of glasses in sangria, you don't know what your pastor's going to do. So I went over, and there was this mom with like an elementary kid and a husband who was sitting like this, and she was bopping. And I'm like, you want to dance? I'm like, come dance with me. And her face like lit up. And she went out and got down. I was like, put to shame, I'm not kind of doing this. And she was all over the place. And then I noticed on kind of the other side of the tables was a very elderly couple. And she was, the wife was doing the same thing. It's like a song came on and she liked it. And so I walked over and I said, I know you want to dance. And they looked at each other and they both got up and came out to dance with me. And they were from Scotland. And kind of in the middle of the song, the husband says this to me, I'm quite a shy person. But I'll tell you, tonight you brought out the best in me. We sowed some seeds of joy that night, just about making a choice to live it and include the people around us. We actually became friends with the owners of Hair of the Dog, a beautiful couple called Alex and Becky. They'd only owned it for 6 months. We actually got together with them for a meal a few days later, and they said to us, because this little restaurant is in this hotel, so it's almost like one of the hotel restaurants, so it's a lot of the same people that go back. She says, people are still talking about Thursday night. They're saying it's just not the same without you and your family. Don't wait for things to get easier or simpler or better. You can choose joy now. It's a choice. It comes from God, if you feel like your joy has been taken away, maybe you have had a season that has felt like exile, you've still got the seeds you can sow and nurture and grow and choose. When the Lord restored the fortunes of Zion, we were like those who dream. Then our mouth was filled with laughter and our tongue with shouts of joy. It was said among the nations, the Lord has done great things for them. The Lord has done great things for us, and we rejoiced. Restore our fortunes, O Lord, like the water courses in the Negev. May those who sow in tears reap with shouts of joy. Those who go out weeping, bearing the seeds of sowing, shall come home with shouts of joy, carrying their sheaves. May God bless this word to you today.